everyone, this is Mrs. Cook, and now that we have talked about the different types of sculpture and you have read a little bit about the different types of sculptures, we're going to be making our first paper relief sculpture. So these are called Zentangle 3D paper sculptures. So first let's talk about what a Zentangle is. So if you don't know already, a Zentangle is a type of drawing, and it's a drawing method that uses repetitive patterns to create an image or a design. So these two examples over here on this slide are examples of Zentangles, and pretty much they just look like doodles that you would do in a notebook. So it uses lots of patterns. So we already know what a pattern is. A pattern is just a design that uses repeated shapes, lines, and colors to create some kind of design. So as I said, it's very similar to doodling, and a lot of times the designs and patterns can just be completely random. The difference between a Zentangle and a doodle, though, is that a Zentangle is created for a purpose. And for our purpose, it will be to add design to our three-dimensional paper sculpture. So this drawing method is meant to be kind of a relaxing, meditative way of creating art. And they even now make coloring books where it's all just a bunch of Zentangles and it's supposed to be something that's relaxing and meditative. So Zentangles are kind of similar to abstract art. Abstract art usually does not represent anything real. So instead it just uses random shapes, lines, and colors, and even textures to create different effects in art or different meanings in art. So unlike a clay sculpture, like for example, a clay food sculpture that we made in quarter one, if you were in the quarter one class, this kind of sculpture that we're going to be making is not intended to represent anything real. So it's not going to be us creating a realistic form out of paper, but rather just an abstract kind of design. So one of the things we're going to focus on with this project is also emphasis. Now, emphasis is a type of principle of art that helps us create a certain kind of effect in our work. An emphasis is the creation of just a focal point in your work of art. So what emphasis is intended to do is just help guide the viewer where to look first in a design. So when you're looking at a Zentangle and there's so many different lines and shapes and patterns going on, emphasis kind of benefits your artwork because it allows you to focus in on one thing and make that one thing stand out. So in this picture on the slide, think what's being emphasized. Well, if I look at the umbrella and all the colors compared to the background is just plain white and the umbrella kind of sticks out. So it's being emphasized by being the only object that's colored in this picture. So it just helps us focus in on where we're supposed to look in this particular photograph. So here are some examples of your Zentangle 3D paper sculpture. So you can tell that we're going to be doing a lot of drawing and a lot of patterns to create the designs and the decoration for this project. So to give you an idea of how exactly this is going to be a sculpture, when we looked at the different types of sculpture, we talked about additive, subtractive, sculpture in the round, and a relief sculpture. Well, this type of sculpture is going to have a flat base where we're going to add the sculptural three-dimensional part to it. So technically, this would be considered a relief sculpture. So if we look at this picture on the right, this shows the artwork from a side view. So over here, you're just looking at it from above, but on this side, you can see that there are actual three-dimensional areas that we're going to be creating by creating our design, cutting it out, and attaching it to the base of our relief sculpture in order to make it pop out and look three-dimensional. So to get started, what you guys are going to do is you will have a 12 by 18 white piece of paper. So it's going to be a pretty big piece of paper so that we can make our sculpture a decent size. The first thing you're going to do is trace a circle on your paper. Now this circle can be anywhere. I just encourage you to not put it in the center because that kind of tends to be boring. So you want to put it maybe off to a different section on your paper. Then what we're going to be doing is creating a line that connects from one side to the other. And this line is going to go all around our entire paper. I'll show you this in a second, but what this is going to do is help us create all different kinds of sections that we can create our pattern designs. So you do want your lines to overlap and crisscross on top of each other to help you create different sections. Now, the one thing that's going to be important is that we need to make sure wherever we start the line and draw around the paper, we have to make sure we come back and connect it so that we end up with one solid shape when we're done. So this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to start in the middle of my circle, and you don't have to do this exactly this way, but this is just one way that you can do it. I'm going to start in the middle of here, and I'm just going to make some swirl, some zigzag lines, and I am going around the whole entire paper. So I need to make sure I'm filling up every piece or the biggest area on my paper. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to connect this line right to where I started. So it's going to look something like that. So when I look at this, I have lots of different sections that I've created with my swirl lines and my different angles. And I also have it all connected as one large shape. So this is a really important step. Then if you look at your design, you're going to have lots of different sections. So I'll have one here, I have one here where this big area is, I'll have a couple here. So in all of these sections, what I'm going to be doing is drawing a different pattern design in each of those sections. So for your pattern designs, I really encourage you to use your iPad and Google different pattern designs. You don't want these all to be boring, but you want at least half of them to be some kind of detailed pattern. So what I don't want you to do is just kind of fill it in with the same pattern on each section, but each one should have a different kind of pattern. So I'm going to draw a little bit on mine, and then I'll show you what I'm looking for in terms of your patterns and how you're going to fill this in. So here's my drawing with just some of my pattern designs filled in. So I wanted to show everyone that you are filling in all of these smaller sections, but then also when you have these big sections here too, you want to fill that in with a pattern design as well. So when I look at my drawing still, I still have things to fill in. So I'll have to go ahead and fill in this one with a pattern, this section, and then these 4 sections right here. So I'm not done yet, but this is just to show you guys how you're going to progress throughout you drawing in your pattern designs. So once I would have my pattern designs all filled in, the different sections I would make, my next step is to Sharpie outline. So when I Sharpie outline, the first thing I'm going to start with is by outlining the circle that we traced, and then by going around and outlining that really big line that you drew across the whole entire paper to connect to the other side. That way, then I can start to see the shape of my sculpture and then the sections that I'm going to have. So then, once you have this outline, you can go in and begin to outline your actual patterns. So I started to outline just a few of my pattern designs, and I want to explain something that's important for us when we're Sharpie outlining. You are going to have sometimes designs where all you can do is Sharpie outline, but there's then going to be other patterns that you're going to be filling in that you're going to want to create a pattern with the Sharpie as well by filling it in solid black. So I'll zoom in on my drawing, for example, that we can see this section right here. So because there's so much detail and patterns in this section, what I wanted to do was choose parts of my patterns to fill in solid black so that I can kind of break up all of those lines. So you really should do this for as many of your patterns as you can. And I even did the same thing with this line pattern that I started with, and then I just created a pattern almost like a checkerboard of every other one to kind of break up just having a bunch of lines. So you really need to make sure you're doing that on your drawing, not just filling in and outlining, but also going in and coloring certain parts of it solid black. So for example, on this really big section that I have right here, once I start to outline all of these lines on my pattern design, what I'm probably going to end up doing is going through and choosing some of these triangle shapes to fill in solid so that it's not just a bunch of lines. So you really want to try to do that on the whole entire drawing for all of your patterns. So today, all I want everyone to focus on is getting your drawing completed and filled in. So do your best to get all of your pencil patterns drawn in and at least begin to Sharpie outline before we move on to the next step, which will be next time in class.